Okay, welcome everyone. Such a joy to see all of you. So what I'd like to do is continue tonight's series on the birds of Orange County with waterfowl. Just a couple of things. So I'd like to do my usual plugs, but the plugs also include where, so the three things I'd like to plug are the three places that I would prefer to go to see waterfowl in our area. So, if you're of a like mind where you're at some point thinking, oh, maybe not today, but a beautiful day for a stroll. Why don't we stroll in one of these places? All three of them nice and flat, places to see waterfowl. You might enjoy that. Also, as I mentioned, the organizations affiliated with them, maybe this is a place where you meet like-minded people who, say, oh, I'd love to go birding and have some company and, talk about what's in our yards, or I just feel better birding with others. So not to play favorites, and I'm sure everyone has, their favorites. But if I wanted to go birding, especially for waterfowl, my three top areas, unless I wanted to hit one of the rivers, like on a kayak, like the Wallkill or the Hudson, I don't know quite as well, would be on the Orange County, New Jersey border in Westtown, the Wallkill River National Wildlife Refuge. They have two areas. There's a Liberty Loop Trail, which is actually part of the Appalachian Trail. But then there's also a winding waters trail on the other side of the road. So, the about a half a mile apart. So if you're coming from Middletown, you're going down, what is it, Oil City Road. It has like two names. Oil City Road is one of them. I think County Line Road is the other. If you make a left, that's the Winding Waters Trail. You make a right, that half a mile later, that's the nice Liberty Loop Trail. Absolutely beautiful, just trail in general, but you can find out all about that. The Bashakill, absolutely wonderful place for waterfowl, about 20 minutes away. Number of different places that you can park on either side. Nice flat areas to walk. And once again, organizations. There's the Bashakill Area Association. They do hikes. They have presentations at Meek with whom they're affiliated. So if that was something that would be of interest to you there, and if you had any, question, just I try to help out the Baskerville Area Association and their Eagles. I'm on the board there. Also and is this, my mic is on, but we can't hear you. Wow. All right. So my mic is that better? Can you hear me now? I'm sorry. I'm not, so if my mic is on, I'm not quite sure what my options are. Okay, so someone else said that they could hear me. Thank you, Liz. TJ, maybe the issue is on your end? Okay, thank you, Barney. Okay, good. So good, that's good, 'cause there's only so many technical glitches that I could help. Otherwise, you'd see me like call my daughter and like, help me out, help out the old man. So thank good we didn't result to that. Um, okay, and then the other thing I'd like to mention is there's 10 minutes up the road is the 6.5 station at Goshen, New York, where just great waterfowl. We'll get to the blue-winged teals. I've been seeing both blue-winged teals and green-winged teals there in the past week. So this is such a wonderful time of the year, and we're so lucky to have such great resources available to us. So not only, am I grateful for all of those who have, come before to help preserve that for us, so we get to watch this, but then also take it as a responsibility that we preserve it for the next generation so that they can not only see birds, but that the birds that rely on these have a place to go. Because that's then the issue with these, where some of these birds, they might stay with us all year round. We'll go through it. There have been birds which have been with us all summer in the waterfowl, and then there are some which we might even see throughout the winter if it's warm enough or on our rivers. But most of these are not them. Most of these are in transit. So Orange County not only provides habitat for a few over the winter, more over the summer. So if you were to go, you'll see images of, the swan, which grew up, the cygnet, which grew up at 6.5 station this summer, the young wood ducks, which grew up there, the mallards, the Canada geese. So we are habitat for, young birds to grow. But also Canada's birds come through here. All right, Canada doesn't get ducks unless they have places where they can stop for a couple of days and refuel. Because there's only so far I can walk before I need a rest and to refuel. But certainly some of these Canadian ducks, they're traveling, just hundreds and hundreds of miles as they go from some of these north of Canada, the northern United States, down to the southern United States and even further. So Orange County is essential habitat for all of these great ducks. Now, we split the waterfowl into swans, geese, and ducks. So I'd like to kind of do that if you don't mind. And along the way, I have a number of videos, and some of my videos. Okay, I'm not sure on the law on that. So I apologize. I would just your question as to why it's illegal to kill a Canadian goose, but it's okay to kill the eggs. I am not sure I know the answer to that. So since I don't know, if you don't mind, I won't start hypothesizing in front of it. So I'd like to start with the swans. And as I go through, I'll mention a few things that happen in spring. But in this series, I was hoping to go through each group one by one. And then there's a couple weeks at the end when we're done our bird groups. And then I was thinking of contrasting Orange County wildlife, say, this is what happens in spring, this is what happens in summer. And so if it looks like we're, about the end of our time. And then I could say, oh, so we'll do a little bit more about duck courtship and swan courtship when we get to the spring, lecture at the end of the semester. But if it looks like, we have some time to fill out, I'll be happy to go back. So we'll touch on these. So the largest of our waterfowl here are these swans. Now, the trick is when you see a swan, you look at the bill first. That's the first thing you're looking at, because its color will direct you on which species it is. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at the orange-billed ones because they're the ones which can stay with us all year. But there are other colors here that you get. So that's the orange-billed one we'll be getting back to. But especially at this time of year, all right, so this is from the Bashik Hill last year. If you look, notice the black bill. So when you see a swan, look for the bill because there are native species and introduced. Of the three species that I'm going to mention, the smaller of the three has a black bill and it is native, all right, although it won't spend its summers here. It's a tundra swan. And so here, this is just, scenes from the Bashiko. You could have seen this, a few years ago, 20 minutes away. Here you see a group of them on the ice, and notice the black bills here. So this is the migration time. You're going to be able to see waterfowl that we don't typically see throughout the year. Now, very similar to this is the trumpeter swan, the largest flying bird in North America. It can be more than 6 feet long with a wingspan of more than 8 feet. It's not as common in this area. It would be technically possible, but if you see a black-billed swan, it's most likely one of the smaller tundra swans. And this one I took from the Great Lakes area, but you can see there's a pink line along here. This was actually an area in Chicago where they raised trumpeter swans and released them into the wild. So there are some swans that we can see, but the one you're most likely to see has an orange bill known as the mute swan, and it was introduced into our area. So a beautiful, beautiful bird, but once again, not a native. If the winters are mild enough, you can see them throughout the winter. If there's anywhere where there's still an open water, and I'm sure some of you might have this experience where there's much of a pond which is frozen, but there's like this tiny little section which is still open water, but you'll see some mute swans hanging out there. They spend all summer here. They raise their young. Last year at 6.5 Station, there were 2 families of mute swans, which went to adulthood. This year, it has only been one. The second one, there was the pair all throughout the summer, but they didn't have any eggs that I know of. The story of the ugly duckling that became a swan is about their young, which are called cygnets. When they are first hatch, in spring. They are white in color. All right, and then they could either be white or tan. A lot of birds have different color morphs as they grow up, but that's one of the fun things you can see in our area. You can kind of watch, all of our mallards, our Canada geese, our wood ducks, and our mute swans growing up over the course of the summer. So here's the 6.5 station sanctuary um, where they would grow. And then as they get older, so around this time of the year, they're starting to get a white, although the one a successful one. This was a tougher year, and I think because it was so dry and the water levels were so low, I think a lot of the waterfowl, they either didn't thrive or maybe more vulnerable to snapping turtles. But for whatever reason, I think a number of them, the number of young which are reaching adulthood are less than last year. But they're at about this phase, and they can leave their parents or they could stay with them over the course of the year. So that's a funny thing. How long will the young stay with the parents? And because mute swans are so big, it takes the cygnets a longer time before they are independent, can fly on their own. They'll spend more time with their parents. So some, especially the females, might stay with their parents until, say, next spring. But then I'm not pushing therapy for, mute swans, but I'm sure at some point this is confusing because at some point come the late winter, spring, the parents, which have been so nurturing, for their whole lives, will now turn on them because they want to start thinking of the next brood and the next nest. And so then they start, just aggressively trying to chase them and force them away. And I'm sure that's very confusing for these mute swans. Um, but that's longer staying with their parents than most birds typically do. Once again, I'll jump ahead. We can get back to this later. But one of the odd things, I don't know that there's a good reason for this, but when we look at the mute swans, the males and females, they look the same. And when we look at Canada geese, the males and the females look the same. And believe it or not, that's correlated with a couple of things. One, the males will help care for the young, okay? And these pairs will tend to be lifelong pairs. Now, I mean, these things can live decades, and so this is quite a committed relationship. But that'll be different once we get to the ducks. Ducks, you can often tell the males from the females, but then we associate that with them, and we'll see that when we get there. They're not going to stay together for life. This is just for this season. So they're faithful to their partner for a little bit of breeding season, and then that's it. And next season, they'll have another partner. And to a large degree, there are exceptions. The males will not help care for the young. And so when you see things look alike, males and females, that for whatever reason tends to be associated with some behaviors and the differences with others. All right. And so I'll talk about the duck courtship in a second, but there's all these neat behaviors that are associated with this. Okay. So we have swans in our area.
No, I'm gonna
We
reveal
have
it.
geese in our area. And if you don't mind, I'm sorry, whenever I just hear, I might just mute someone who might have there we go. Excellent. So Canada geese, we've certainly seen a lot of them, and they are almost considered pests in some areas. I would like to just plug this a couple of ways. About 100 years ago, you could shoot almost anything at almost any time. All right, and so many species of bird, their populations were rapidly declining, especially bigger ones that you could eat like geese. So believe it or not, while Canada geese weren't endangered, they were going in that direction. All right. The fact that a lot of us may consider them to be pests, in a way, that's to be celebrated. Like, we did a good job. We brought the species, which was so rapidly declining, back to the point where, how to control them is an issue. And so I think I mentioned this last time that I'm very proud to help the Audubon Society out on Christmas bird counts, and everyone here, you're welcome to help us out. Because it used to be the tradition that around that time, instead of going out and counting birds, you would be out shooting them, and we'd have a contest. Whoever came home at the end of the day and you had shot the most living things, you were the winner. All right. And so, that was the culture back in the day. But then it was some laws earlier in the past century, the 20th century, that prohibited this. And organizations like the Audubon Society were key in getting that. So this is a success story that they are back. All right, there were states that in New York where Canada geese were few and far between for a while because of how much hunting had gone on. Now, I have a number of trail cams up, and I'm always, surprised to see Canada geese. They can be pretty active at night. All right, and so they're active in the day. They can be active at night, and they eat plant material, which once again, there are lots of birds that eat plant stuff, but it's usually fruits and berries, and maybe some grainy things from grasses. Very few birds can actually eat the green stuff because to eat green stuff, you need intestines. I mean, there's lots of mammals that, I mean, deer can eat the green stuff, and so can giraffes, and so can moose, and so can cows, and some can goats. But they're pretty big, and their guts are big because they've got all these chambers in their guts to ferment all of this stuff. And for birds to do that, that would almost prohibit flying, right? So like things that don't fly, like ostriches or rheas, they could make it work. All right, but other geese and swans, they're unusual in that, they're out eating the grass because they have enough intestines to make this work. But then if you've ever seen them try to take off, you can see their size as a bit of a problem. They can't, like the birds at your bird feeder, just do a flap and they're already airborne. You'll see them, flapping for a while to get up momentum. And so if you can eat grass, well, then, that's an advantage because there's a lot of grass, and then you can become pretty common. Whereas, after a certain point, however, it does, affect your ability to take off. So they're at that interesting juncture of being able to take advantage of a great food source. So like even in winter, like the bugs are gone, a lot of the aquatic life are gone, but you can still find dried plant material. But once again, you can only get so big doing that. Canada geese also pair for life. All right, they have courtships. They chase each other away. All right, and when it comes to spring, one of the things we can observe in our areas that they breed here. They'll lay their eggs and then raise their goslings throughout the year. So, TJ. Okay, thank you. But then there are other geese. And so one of the geese that I love to see in Orange County are the snow geese. And one of the lessons I wish I had learned early on that I'm just going to pass on just in case it's helpful is I just associated bird watching and hiking with warm weather because that's nice and comfortable, and then it just gets too cold and I'm not in the mood. I'm just going to wait for the warm weather. And I didn't appreciate till later that you've missed so much that if you're not hiking in the winter, well, there's some things that's the only time you're going to see, like these snow geese in Orange County, and that the Wallkill Refuge that I mentioned near the Orange County border, that's the place to see them. Although they can be everywhere. There was a flock right up the road at the Carmelite Shrine, the pond now. They had for about 2 weeks, maybe like 8 years ago, a big flock of the snow geese that hung out there for a while. So you can see them anywhere. But that Wallkill Reserve, that is the best place to see them. And they can form flocks of thousands and hundreds of thousands, and they all try to change direction in unison. And so just watching the change in colors as the white turns, now you can see the black wingtips. It is really something to see. So here, this is a little south of us. It's been my experience that if you were to go to Stroudsburg and then start going to Philly right when you hit Route 22 right near Allentown, there's a lot of farms there. And then you could just see driving down the road here, you can just see this enormous number of snow geese taking off. So like the way a lot of our birds go south for the winter, this is south for them. All right, so they spend their summers in the north of Canada, and they do go south for the winter. This being south for, so they're on vacation. So if you don't see them in the winter, then you're not going to see them. The only time you see snow geese other than the winter would be the one year here. Here's a snow goose in the spring that you'll see. But unfortunately, if you watch its wing, clearly it had injured its wing. So the rest of its flock kept on going. But this was here on the Wallkill River in the warmer months. Once again, not because of its choice, but it probably was unable to go further. Snow geese, right? Somewhere I have a picture, I'm sure. Snow geese, most of them are white, but they actually do have two color morphs. So most of the snow geese look like this, but you can see a grayer form as well, looking more bluish. The third and final goose um, in our area is what's called the brant. It kind of looks like a Canada goose, and so one never knows. Like I think I mentioned this last time that I was watching a bunch of turkey vultures and I looked really close and I saw there was an immature bald eagle in the midst. You might have the same experience where the one on the lower left I saw at the Wallkill Center in a bunch of Canada geese, and it's colored like the Canada geese. And you might say, oh, there's a big bunch of Canada geese, but this is called a brant. All right, so it's a much smaller goose with a shorter neck. They live more in brackish water, saltier water. And so once I was at the Statue of Liberty and I just happened to notice all these, so I decided to pick pictures of them. So we wouldn't see them here as much, but if you were on the Hudson and then going closer to the coast, you might see more brants. Okay. So in our area, we have swans, we have geese, and then we have the ducks. So I'd like to transition into the ducks. And there's more of those. So if you're going to start identifying ducks, one of the first things that we're going to keep in the back of our minds always is, are they dabbling or are they diving? Because there's a whole bunch of ducks out there. But if you answer that question, are they dabbling or diving, you've now split the potential ones in half. So as far as identifying them, that makes your life a little easier. So what I mean by dabbling is when they feed, do they just kind of upend themselves so that their butts stick out of the air and they are just reaching whatever they can in shallow water? So these are mallards, for example, look at them feeding. They are dabbling. So these are dabbling ducks. And I'll go through first all of the dabbling ducks in our area. Here are some green-winged teals. They just came back to our sanctuary up the road. That's kind of exciting. There's a black duck too. I haven't seen them yet this year. They are all dabbling ducks feeding close to the shoreline, as are the wood ducks, but we'll be getting to all of these. But the second question, this will be the second group of ducks we see. Notice what they do. They dive underwater in order to feed. And so as you watch the ducks, if they occasionally go underwater, then you say, okay, you're in this group. If they're dabbling, they're in this group. And now as far as trying to identify them, you have a much smaller list to identify. All right, so here we see a bunch. All right, they'll go underwater. There they go. All right, so those would clearly be diving ducks. So there are a bunch of the dabbling ducks. Let's start off with those. I love these ones, the northern pintails. But if you don't recognize those, it's because they're migratory. Like you would have to go out now or in the spring to see them, not all summer. So let's start with the ones which live here, our residents. So our resident dabbling ducks would be mallards and wood ducks. Now, mallards are so common that, I'll kind of zip through them, perhaps they're not as exciting. But the head really is brilliant. All right, that's a brilliant green. And brilliant greens are not that common in birds. Like if you were to name like what birds have that brilliant a shade of green, very often in the tropics, like some in the parrot group, etc. But it's unusual. And so why are they unusual having green heads? Well, just like the blues, and I'll mention blues with the blue-winged teals and the northern shovelers in a second, birds don't have green and blue pigments, all right? They just have brown, all right? And then there's the carotenoids that it can eat. But if you arrange the brown pigments in such a way that like light waves are hitting your feathers and like light wave number 1 bounces off, and then light wave number 2 bounces off at a slightly different depth. Then as those light waves bounce off coming from slightly different layers in the feather structure, they start to interfere with each other and then give you a green color that wasn't originally there, or a blue color, the way like an oil bubble would. Like if you take soap, like dish soap, it doesn't have to have like shiny blue colors, but when you look at a bubble, you might say, ooh, look at the kind of iridescent color. That color wasn't originally there. It's how two different layers reflect light and those interfere with each other. So that's physically how mallards are not getting their heads. It's not a pigment molecule. It's what's called a structural pigment. It's the way that the feather is structured that's providing that. Now, a second reason that we could say they have green heads is testosterone. All right. So just in general, there's two things. I teach genetics, and one thing I was just saying to my class today is it's one thing to have a gene, it's another thing to use it. All right. So there's genes that you have and genes that you use. And a lot of the hormones that we make, like estrogen and testosterone, what they do literally is they go to the DNA, stick to it, and turn on genes. So when estrogen is in our cells, and males and females make estrogen, estrogen goes into the DNA, sticks to it, and now the genes that get turned on are different from the ones that were turned on before. Testosterone does the same thing. So both male and female mallards have genes to make these green pigments. But in breeding season, now the mallards, the male mallards, their testes produce testosterone, so they start turning on genes that the females are not turning on. And so this is why, as they produce feathers, the males then have this distinctive green head. Another reason, I want to get back to the green because this is an exciting time for the mallards. But another reason, we'll get to this at the end, is you'll see how many ducks there are. Females have decisions to make, like who do we have sex with? All right. And there's lots of wrong choices. So if every species kind of gets a signature, coloration pattern, like the females can say, green heads, they're mine, and they don't now, potentially accept mating advances from other species because the eggs wouldn't hatch and the females would have wasted their reproductive energies. So having just any color which sets you apart from the other species, because in spring, it's breeding season, there could be a dozen different species on the pond, and females have to know who they belong to. So we'll get back to them in a second. Now, once again, I'll just do this quickly. You probably haven't seen that in a while, the bright green head of a mallard. In fact, a lot of you, if you go walking, you might say, where did the males go? All right, well, females look like that, and I can tell it's a female by the reddish bill. All right, but then so too do the males look like that somewhere. All right. So like if you're on the Delaware, you might say, oh, I think they're mallards, but I'm looking for the green heads. I just don't see any. That's because males molt their feathers. And sometimes one of the molts is less distinctive. So males don't keep their green heads all year round. So that's a male. All right, this is what males look like in summer. And that's what we call eclipse plumage. All right, now two reasons. A bright green head would make you stand out. Predators would be have easier time to find you. Now that's not ever good. But especially for ducks, because a lot of birds will molt their feathers gradually. Like, hey, I'll lose a feather here, a feather there. Last week with the raptors, I showed you that in the head or the tail of the oh no, I'm sorry, no, that's coming up. I just made that video. My fault. Sorry. I'm making videos and teaching videos and I'm getting them mixed up. So here we have a male that's got a yellower bill, but it is in eclipse. All right. But right around this time of the year, you're going to see that changing. So here's a mallard from just a week ago, and I'm seeing a lot of this. It looks sick, doesn't it? I mean, just like it looks just kind of dirty and dingy, but now it's gradually getting its green feathers in. All right, so same thing here. This is starting to turn a little bit green because I know a lot of us are preparing for winter, right? Well, you Game of Thrones fans, winter is coming. We know that. We're starting to get ready. But looking at them, they're getting ready for breeding season. All right, they've been, in their eclipse plumage for a couple of months now. They're thinking it's time to start attracting a mate now. So the wood ducks, which we'll see in a second, they're starting to get really colorful now. And the mallards are starting to get really colorful now. The green-winged teals are not colorful yet, but like in another month they will be, because they're going to start attracting mates. So it's kind of interesting that while a lot of the birds are heading south and they're thinking of winter, a lot of the ducks, they've already got spring on their mind. All right. So here, if you look closely, you can see some of the green start to come in. Now, once again, I'd like to keep some of the relationship stuff until, we talk about spring. But one of the things that always strikes me with birds is that hybridization is possible. Like it is possible for one species to mate with another bird, what we call another species, and therefore be a hybrid offspring. That happens. There's lots of examples of that. But mallards do that a lot. Now, I hate to malign or anything, but I think like mallards will mate with almost anything. All right. And they're pretty aggressive as well. All right. And so one of the things we can see in birds, but we see a lot with mallards more so than others, is males will try to mate with females who will then try to resist. But then there may be multiple males attempting this. The females may spend some time underwater and may even drown. So mallard males are pretty aggressive in trying to chase almost anything. They mate with a lot of species, and you can see them just kind of pursuing their mates here. They chase each other away as well. And then every now and then you can see a hybrid, like especially with black ducks, you can see a hybrid. So I think, I'm not positive, but I think this duck here had a black duck for a parent and a mallard for a parent because it's kind of in between. Okay, so mallards are dabbling ducks, which will spend their summer here, breed, raise their young here. The other big species for that are the wood ducks. Now, male wood ducks, very, very distinctive, right? Notice you can see them here in the cold weather, right? Are hybrids? No, hybrids aren't always sterile. That's the wild, wild west. We would have to, and that's almost as case by case. So for example, I think the most famous example is horses and donkeys, when they mate, they make mules, which are sterile. That is true if the male parent, let me get this right. Yeah. Oh, I think I have this right. If the male parent was the horse and the female was the donkey, the mule would be sterile. But if the male parent was the donkey and the female was the horse, you can actually have mules which are fertile. So it's complicated as groups which are genetically distinct have kids, and you say, what do their kids turn out to be? There are lots of possibilities, and it's not this one, here's the rule, this always happens. That's not what, just you kind of wait and see, and it can vary a bit. So good question. So the male wood ducks are really distinctive with the coloration that they have. But just like the mallards, let me just go back to another video I just posted. That also wasn't the way most of the summer. All right. So you can tell during breeding season, males versus females, because females have this nice white eye ring, while males, just beautiful red bill. And I do want to emphasize red bill. That'll become important in a second. They've got a red eye. They've got this nice bright throat stripe, green on the heads, etc. It's just easy to tell who's the male and who's the female. Okay, there's the female once again. Right. Females are the only ones caring for the young. That's a duck thing. All right. But here now, you may then get to the summer and you say, all right, where have all the beautiful wood ducks gone? And the answer is, well, there's a male there. All right. So males during summer can be juveniles, all right, which grew up that year, or they can be, once again, in eclipse. Now notice it's a male. It's still got that white stripe, whereas the female has the white ring around the eye. And then if you were trying to figure out, is it a juvenile or a male in eclipse, the juveniles would have like a yellowish bill. So this is kind of a new one. This is its first year. All right. Whereas if we were to look a little later, this one is probably first year, but it's starting to get into a breeding plumage for the first time. Notice the bill is getting a little bit redder. But if you were to see one that looks kind of dull, so you wouldn't think that that's a wood duck, not a male. But the bright red bill says that's a mature male. Like he's gone through breeding seasons before, but he is once again in eclipse plumage. So during the summer, why attract predators? Because one, they're molting all their feathers, so they're not good flyers. And I apologize. I think I maybe started that sentence and didn't finish it. Um, Unlike most birds that molt their feathers gradually, ducks do it all at once. So there's a while where they can't fly. Now, for females, I mean, I'm sure that's a bit of a burden, but they're caring for the young. So they weren't really going to fly much anyway. They were going to like swim with the young and try to herd them. Whereas the males, they're not helping with the young, but they can't fly. So if they were being nice and showy, then the females aren't interested because have already mated and they're raising their young. And so now predators could potentially find the males. So this is a mature male during summertime. It's got the nice red bill, and immature wouldn't have that until at the end of as it enters breeding for the first time. But you can see it's not trying to impress anyone because it doesn't want to attract predators. And the females aren't going to start pairing up until, this time, maybe October, November, going in through spring. And so males are going to just go into this eclipse plumage until the next breeding season. So once again, that's a mature male, and you wouldn't necessarily know it's a wood duck, but they're just now starting to get back into plumage that looks like that. Okay. So mallards and wood ducks, I mean, they're with us all summer. We get to watch their families grow up. That's wonderful. But this time of year, you go out and you say, who are you? And then another one, who are you? Because these are birds which don't spend the summers with us, but we get two chances to see them in the fall migration and in the spring migration. So some of these are dabbling ducks, like this one called the northern pintail. And you see why, obviously, it gets its name. It's a dabbling duck, so it's going to stick its butt in the air, but its butt has these really long tail feathers, so that's distinctive. The males have these distinctive brown heads and the white stripes. The females are a little better at camouflaging, right? And these are early migrants. So when it comes time for the spring migration, so there you see a male and a female together. When it comes time for the spring migration, if you were to bet money, you were to say, all right, we're going to see that earlier in the year than we see like the green-winged teals. All right, so like there could still be snow on the ground, and you're like, but I see that the pintails are migrating, and the ringneck ducks are migrating. But the teals and the widgeons, they're still a ways off. So the waterfowl migrations, it goes in waves. All right, and some species are earlier, some species are later. These are earlier to come back, and they're really beautiful birds. Big birds about the size of mallards and distinctive colors. Black ducks look a lot like mallards, but they don't get the green heads. They just look a little darker. All right, so here you can see two black ducks. Also larger. I was just taking some pictures of some ducks up the road, and the mallards are big, and there's two species of teal, and you can just tell. I mean, they're so much smaller that you can say, even if you don't know what they are, you're like, okay, well, they're not the mallards. So black ducks are big like mallards. Some would be smaller. And we're worried about those. Their numbers are dropping. And so some of that might be the mallards, mating with them and, kind of creating fewer and fewer full-bred black ducks here. But then with all of the habitat loss and the climate change, I'm sure there's other reasons that would affect them as well. And so as we're looking at bird populations decline, black ducks are, higher on the list of the ones that we are concerned about. Although it is possible for them to stay all year round, you're most likely to see them in migration time. So once again, this is the time for black ducks, going forward for the next, month or two, and then during the spring migration back, but then over the summer, you're not as likely to see them. They do hang around mallards a lot. So you'll notice this trail cam was picking up, mallards and black ducks in the same vicinity. Right, so here you can see like the chocolate color of the black ducks there. Okay, there's something in the chat. Let me just, okay. Yes. Uh, oh, okay. Yeah, so ligers and tigons. So the question on ligers, just going ahead, um, when you're naming the offspring of tigers and lions, you have to know which was the male versus the female, because in one way it's called a liger, but the other way it's called a tigon, and they're different. They look different. So just getting back to that question where hybridization stuff. Yes, wood ducks do nest in trees. Once again, if we had time at the end, I don't think so. We'll get more into courtship, but otherwise, when we talk about what happens in spring. But one of the things with wood ducks nesting in trees, they can nest really high, like 40 feet in the air, I think even a little higher sometimes as well. So you think about what life is like for a baby wood duck. It hatches, and on its first day of life, it's going to jump out of a hole and then land. We're trying not to break anything, which could be 40 feet in the air. So, what you manage on your first day of life, that's always impressed me with the wood ducks. Um, Getting into more of the dabbling ducks, then we have smaller ones. All right. And so these have just appeared, the green-winged teals and the blue-winged teals. Green-winged teals are easy to see. Blue-winged teals, that's kind of exciting. They're a lot harder to see. We don't have as many. In about a month, you'll say, oh, look at the males, this nice cinnamon head, this bright green stripe. They're not quite there yet. They also went into eclipse plumage. And what you're going to look for is the green spot on their wings for right now. They'll be a little more distinctive in a month. All right, but here you see they're not diving, they're just kind of dabbling. Now they can eat plant material, but that one was picking off bugs from the surface of the water. Here you can see why they're called the green-winged teals. All right, they've got this nice green speculum there. And then here behind it is a blue-winged teal. We'll talk about that one in a second. We get lots of green-winged teals, and last year they spent a lot of time here. They came and they loved it at the station near the 6.5 station near Goshen, and they stayed for like 2 months. That was wonderful. So lots of them. So these are neat, the green-winged teals. It is kind of harder to see them right now. So just my advice to you for right now, if you saw a small duck, it's probably a green-winged teal, but they're just still like all brownish. There's nothing really distinctive. But then once again, just look for their wings for um, that green patch there. So here, this is around this time from last year, right up the road. Once again, like, what duck is that? There's not a whole lot leaping out at you, all right, because the males are in eclipse plumage. But if the sun is right, you'll catch the nice shiny green patches for the green-winged teals, right? And you can see that, they're fairly common. They congregate in these big groups here. All right. Once again, unless you notice that they're just kind of drab colored, and then so might be harder to identify. So look for that green wing here, the green wing. And then there's this one, which is hard to see, but they're in our area up the road. This is a blue-winged teal, and they often hang out with the green-winged teals. So something I've been doing lately is when I think a group of birds is boring, I take pictures anyway, and then I go home and I look, because sometimes I said, oh, it's just a bunch of X, but in the middle of the X there was a Y. And I'm like, oh, I got to see one of these. And so these are not as common, but if you've got a bunch of green-winged teals, and especially in flight, you might say, "Ooh, look! I think I see some blue on the wings. Ooh, that was a blue-winged teal. That was kind of a special bird." Now, the blue-winged teals in spring, males got a nice white patch in the front of their face, but they're kind of solitary. Like this is kind of like a hidden pool. They're a little less likely to let you get close to them. Those are the male blue-winged teals. But once again, in flight, they've got a nice blue patch on their wings. Now, I said this last time with the eagle. we use words and just we get used to these words, so we assume they have meaning, but they don't always. Like we say, eagle versus hawk, or salmon versus trout. They're different things. No, they're like this group of eagles is related to this groups of hawks. This group of eagles is related to this groups of hawks. That an eagle is just a big hawk, and that's evolved a couple of times. And the same thing with trout and salmon. These salmon are more closely related to these trout. These salmon are more closely related to these trout. So we have a blue-winged teal and a green-winged teal, but the blue-winged teals are actually cousins of the northern shoveler, not the green-winged teal. So just be careful. Like what we say, like, oh, we'll put a name and put you guys in the box. It might not be the box that they belong in. But once it becomes the name that we're used to, it's hard for us to change. Going through our list of migrant dabblers, the American widgeon. Now, this is a cute bird, but it's hard to describe because it's got a lot going on. Like it's got like a white patch on its tail. It's got like a cream colored mohawk going there. It's got a little green by the eye. The grayish blue of the head is a little different from the brown here. The blue, the bill is a little blue. So if you wanted to identify a mallard, you just say green head. You don't have to list a list of characteristics. So I think widgeons are a little harder from that standpoint. But here's a widgeon from up the road earlier this spring. Okay. And once again, the males are a little brighter than the females. So there you can see males and females in these videos. We're getting just about to the end of the dabbling ducks. Here's one called the northern shoveler, and it's named for its bill. When you look at that bill, that's a serious bill compared to what most ducks have. And ducks have a varied diet. They eat a lot of plant material. That would be number one. But you saw them eating bugs on the surface of the water, and they can eat aquatic invertebrates as well. Some of the aquatic invertebrates are these little clammy things and snails which have shells. And so obviously if you have a thicker bill, now going after those mollusks and crushing their shells is a little easier for you. So this northern shoveler, that's what it specializes in. We don't see big groups of them. Like, so you'll see a lot of, mallards together, a lot of green-winged teals together. You'll see, smaller groups of these together. And all of the ones that you've just seen, this is the time of year to see them. So the black ducks, the green-winged teals, the blue-winged teals, the widgeons, the northern shoveler, they're not here in winter, and they're not going to be here in summer raising their young. We only see them when they're going in between their breeding grounds north of us and their wintering grounds south of us. So once again, while it's beautiful to go bird watching in May and in June, there are certain birds you're just not going to see. So like now's the time, the upcoming month and a half, to see a lot of these species. And then notice the females, once again, don't have the, that more distinctive coloration that the males do. So there's the female northern shoveler there. Okay. So among the ducks, we have dabbling ducks. And then there are the diving ducks. Very often, the diving ducks are also known as sea ducks because we see them in deeper water. If you go to the Great Lakes, you'll see them. They like that. But then in more coastal areas, in bays, and even on the ocean, you can see them. This is known as the ringneck duck, and I'd like to pause. Some birds have just really hard names. Like there's a beautiful woodpecker we have in our area called the red-bellied woodpecker. You will never see its red belly. It's just this faint little thing. It has to be a dead bird. If there was a dead bird, you would say, there's a little red spot right there, but you would never ever see it. So why it has that name, there are better names. Same thing, this is a ring-neck duck. All right. Now, in the old days with duck hunting, I'm sorry, individuals still, obviously a duck hunt today. If you had a dead duck in front of you, you would say, oh, look, there's a brown stripe around its neck. But you would almost never see it unless the light was just right, hitting it nice. So here you can see that there's a nice chocolate stripe on the otherwise black head. That's why it's called the ring neck duck. You'd probably recognize more the white rings around its dark bill. They like to hang in big groups. They are diving ducks, as you can see, and they will tend to be one of the earlier ones to come in the spring and one of the later ones to go south in the fall. They like deeper water, and what I'm about to say pains me, but the sanctuary at 6.5 Station, it's filling in and filling in. The water just gets shallower and shallower as waterways do. And so if you're looking for diving ducks, places like the Bashakill would be great. The Wallkill Center, depending on how they maintain the water level, would be great. But rivers like the Hudson would be great as well. And you can see big groups of these. Definitely bring your binoculars because they probably won't let you get close. They'll be out in the middle of whatever body of water that is. Then there are other diving ducks. This one's a little smaller. It is called a bufflehead. Once again, you can see there's a difference between males and females. There's the male, there's the female.
Did you say buffle?
Buffle, Buffle, bufflehead. So in a second, you'll see them diving. All right, so there's one diving. I'm sorry, I know I got pictures. My YouTube channel, which if you ever wanted to see these again, is Dr. Jan 41, DRJAHN 41. I've got like all these videos. Really no. Let me just try the whole word. And so I have like all of these 11 years. All right.
What are some of the microbes in the top title bracket?
The one more time? Microbes?
No, up there. The branding cover.
Up here?
Yeah, those colors.
I teach a lot of classes. So I have videos like on ducks, but I teach anatomy and physiology. I teach genetics. So there's just a whole bunch of things going on. That's just kind of welcome you. And I'm sorry, I thought I made a video out of that. I guess I just did pictures for my newsletter. I'm sure I can find them here. Here we go. For this winter, there was an Eagle Fest near Croton Park. It's just outside of Orange County, going towards the city. But on the Hudson, there were some buffleheads that let you get pretty close. So here's just some nice pictures of buffleheads. They'll migrate through, but as I said, if you're on the Hudson, maybe you could find them, all throughout the winter. Someone said something in the chat. The question, can the green and blue-winged teal crossbreed? I don't think so, because like I said, the blue-winged teal is actually the cousin of the northern shoveler and not the green-winged teal. So I have not heard of them being able to crossbreed. So they are, I'm sorry, if I'm going to do buffleheads, then obviously I have to follow it with a similar looking duck called the golden eye. All right, but it doesn't have a big white spot on the back of the head, rather in the front of the head in males. Females look a little bit different, but if you were to look really close, their eye has a nice yellow color, as you would probably guess from the name. But here you can see them being diving ducks. Okay. Once again, if you want to see these, you want to hit a big lake where it's deeper water, or one of the rivers like the Hudson. The Bashakill is nice as well. But once again, these migrate through. So we'll definitely see these, but not during the summer here. Ruddy ducks are also diving ducks. They can be identified from afar because their tails very often are held out at an angle, as you can see that. So, it's a nice little cue from far away. They can change, their coloration throughout the year, as many ducks, do. So here you can see a male that's got like more of a chocolate color and a more brighter color. They can be a little bit more drab in autumn. And then here you can see, male and a female, and they'll go diving again in a second. Now, before I get into the mergansers, which are the last couple, one last one is you never know what you're going to see, but it's important to remember because obviously, you live in this area, you say, oh, here are my favorite spots, like, the ones which are closest to me, but you never know, maybe you visit a friend up in the Great Lakes or closer to the Jersey Shore. This was, I took this at Tuxedo Park, but you'll notice the redhead. We have two red-headed ducks in our area. One is called the redhead. It's small. I have seen it in Orange County, but it's rare. They like salt water, so you're more likely to see it here. And the same would be true of this one called the canvasback. This is from the Bashik, which was a wonderful duck to see. They're hard to see in this area. They like salt water more. Yes.
I just saw a bird that I saw from the ocean when I was looking at Legoland.
Ooh,
That bird.
really?
Yeah, go back. They had
The canvasback?
had the orange, the corner of a circle patch with the figure right at the edge. On top of.
So this canvas? Oh, the red-winged blackbird. Oh, okay. Great, red-winged blackbird. We'll be getting to those. So in our last three lectures are on the songbirds. And the second of the lectures on the songbirds will include the blackbirds, and red-winged blackbirds would be among that group. Yeah, they're fun birds. Well, they really like marshes and just the marshes in that area.
Oh, no, that's expensive. So, two marshes in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's a lousy picture of the only redhead I've ever seen, but that would be the second one. Redheads and like all of the diving ducks, they're often referred to as sea ducks because brackish water, it's a bit deeper. They're more commonly found there. And then there are two final diving ducks that I'd like to hit before we start to wrap up. They are called mergansers. And if you notice, ducks normally have this wide duck bill, but mergansers are the exception. They have very narrow bills. And we associate that with trying to eat fish, like even among like crocodiles, right? There are crocodiles with wide snouts, but then there are the gharials, which have the very narrow snouts. Because if you're trying to get a slippery, rapid fish, taking this big fat snout and slamming it shut, you just lose a split second and you might lose your meal. If you've got this narrow thing, it's just a little easier to close it. So the mergansers are going to eat a little more fish and animal life in their diet. The males during winter, green head, orange bill, nice, obvious white chest. But right now you couldn't tell them because the males and the females look about the same, and more camouflage. They haven't shifted here. So here is a female, and the males look very similar at this time of year. All right, the Delaware River is a great place to see them all throughout the summer. So they breed in our area and have rather large groups of offspring. And here's one that migrates through the hooded merganser. Black head with a big white spot on it, but notice the narrow bill, males and females there. All right, so I'm sorry, I think I just hear someone in the background. Give me a second. I just want to forgive me. I think I need to mute. Megumi, did you have a question? I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand earlier.
It was about the mute swan behavior. If you're not back to that, I can wait till the end, or
okay. Tell you what, I am just about at the end. I'd be happy to. Yeah. So you'll be first. Question number one. Okay. So this is smaller than the other mergansers, but also a diving duck. You'll see it diving, and here you can see the male can, raise the crest on his head. This is the time of year to see them, all right, because they are migrating through in autumn. They'll migrate through in spring, but they don't spend their summers here. And then there are the unusual ones, just like the canvasback is unusual. Last winter, we saw this at the Wallkill. Now you'd say, oh, it's a common merganser. And then if you look closely, you're like, ooh, no, look at that. That's not white. That's red. That's a red-breasted merganser. That's unusual. They're more saltwater birds, unless you went to the Great Lakes. So I went to visit a friend of mine. Some of you in the audience know Paul Basinski, who's along Lake Erie. I went to see him over spring break. And there you see lots of these red-breasted mergansers. So New York's a big place. And so while Orange County, a red-breasted merganser is a very unusual find, and you'd get excited if you were at the Great Lakes, you'd see them every day. All right, so New York's a big place. And so, birds have habitats and niches. In summary, this is such a great time of year. I mean, Orange County always has great birds, and it's always great to get out. But most of what I've mentioned today, this is the time of year to see them. The fall migrations, the spring migrations, and that's it. And so, you'd have to wait, until next spring to see a lot of these if you don't see them now. And we're so fortunate where, the Heritage Trail goes right past the 6.5 station, the Bashik, these beautiful flat trails that used to be railways, the National Wallkill area, just such, easy areas to hike near these bodies of water. If you bring a pair of binoculars in the upcoming months, who knows what you'll see. So I'll answer questions in just a second, starting with Megumi. But it's so nice of you to come. So thank you so very much. I'll be answering questions. Next week, we're going to do the other aquatic birds. So obviously waterfowl are aquatic birds. Next week will be everything else. So like from herons to plovers to, all of the other things, that we'll get into raptors the week after that. I hope you get to go out, and I hope you enjoy the bird watching that you can do this year. So Megumi, you had a question.
Oh, that was great. Thank you much. And I've heard some horrors about swans, so I want to warn people that the swans can be quite aggressive. I know of someone who drowned.
Yes.
Is that the mute swan? Are they really territorial?
I've heard it mostly with trumpeters. So just, not to be negative. But if you had a young child playing, by the side of a pond and approaching like a trumpeter swan, especially if, they had a nest, you go get the child out of there. Like these are really like they can have a wingspan of 6 to 8 feet and they defend their territory. So yes, people have drowned. And so, if you're in a kayak, boats can be a little tippy. Yeah, they'll go after you. If I were to flip over, be floundering around in the water, I certainly wouldn't want a bird with an 8-foot wingspan mad at me. Or 6 foot, I'm sorry. So yes, unfortunately, Megumi, that is true. You had a question.
Okay.
With the ducks, does their mating ritual change if they're in a sea instead of a pond?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I think as far as mating rituals, so there's courtship rituals, and I don't
Please
think
repeat
that's
the question.
So the question is, do mating rituals vary in between ducks, which are more sea ducks versus land ducks? So what I know is each species does its own thing, like whether the males are bobbing their head this way, or whether the swans are straightening out their neck. I don't know that follows like the freshwater ones do it this way, and the more brackish water ones do it another way. And you certainly wouldn't want that because, just getting back, we can get to this with courtship. You want to set yourself apart because, we humans, like, I hope all of you, like, let's say you have dinner plans or you're going out and like, I don't know, maybe you're at dinner and you look across the table, you find someone a little attractive and I don't, you want to, ask if you can sit with them. Has anyone ever like said, wait a minute, stop. Is this a member of my species? Has anyone ever done that? Okay. Well, it sounds silly because anyone who looks human is. But when you get to ducks, anyone, a duck, there's lots of species of duck. So if you're on a lake, you can see more than a dozen species on the same lake during breeding season. If they're trying to find a mating partner, there's lots of wrong choices there. And so what you want is you want them to look different, to act differently. And so as far as like the behaviors, I think you wouldn't want like a similarity in all the ones that hang in the same area. You'd want like, a female to say like, oh, this one's bobbing its head this way. That's one of mine as opposed to one of those. As far as the sex act itself, it doesn't last that long. So I'm not quite sure that there would be variations from this group to that group. It's just not as prolonged. The courtship can be like when mute swans are courting, that can be an hour as they like rub their necks, along each other and they, put their bills and caress each other. So the courtship rituals, I think, would be very distinctive. Than the mating act, probably much less. Any other questions? Yes.
Is a loon a duck?
No, it is not. So that'll come up next week. So it would be one of those other aquatic birds that, just a kind of a grab bag group of diverse ones. Yes, in the back. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Why do they last minute that you're doing that? And I know full of bacteria,
Mhm.
you just have to jump over it. So why do they do that? And that's a long walk. And then they walk back. Because when I pick up my grandson, he's just flying in business, see the dog.
Mhm.
I mean, but I don't understand why they do that.
I don't know why they do that, but one of the things that's kind of interesting to me is nature is changing. I mean, like, with climate change, et cetera, change in human habitation. Canada geese did not usually spend the winters in our area until very recent. And now it's a thing where there are just populations that will stay here the whole year. So that alone is, I think, interesting. I don't know that. I think that it takes them so long to take off, and it's so energetic because they're heavy, especially if they are newer Canada geese that are a little younger. Maybe flying's not quite their thing yet. Their feathers are maybe mostly the way they're probably good at this point. But there would be a time of the year where no, they would be doing most of their walking because they would have molted their feathers. And once again, with all that intestine, they would need to get their feathers to almost full length before they would be able to take off. Beyond that, I'm not quite sure why they would choose, unless it's just, I'm just a big, heavy, goose, and I would prefer to walk rather than fly. Just, yeah. Yes, you had a question.
Two questions. What was the bird that could move its feathers on its head and neck?
Oh, a bunch can. So the one we saw was a hooded merganser. But blue jays can do that a little bit, like just like cats, like their hair stands up depending on how they're feeling. Crest with a blue jay, when they're with their ones they like, it'll go down a little bit. When they feel a little bit threatened, it goes up a little bit. Green herons, they stick their feathers straight up. So a bunch of birds can change how high they hold their head feathers. You had a second question?
Yeah. My second question was.
Okay.
Wait. I remember.
What's
now.
the duck, the upper left of the buffle head photo? I'm not. Okay. Okay. Good night, everyone. Thanks for everyone who came online. Hoodeds have nested. Hoodeds have nested at the Bashaco. Oh, that's neat. I didn't know that. Good places, the Delaware for the goldeneye. Oh, and Marty would know. So Marty, yeah, at any point, if you want to share your great wisdom on birds or anything, by all means, feel free to. And so just some comments online and some good ones as well. And actually, and to be perfectly honest, I certainly try to share with the newsletter I write for the Audubon Society, like the things that I know. But there are so many people who have so much experience, and that's one of the joys of going out in a group where, someone said like, oh, I've seen this, I went on vacation, and this. So, if you get to go on some of the walks which are advertised through the Bashakel Association where they do hikes, or the Audubon Society, every person will present their experiences a little bit differently. So by all means, there's so many experts in our area to learn from. Yes.
For regulation, for collecting bird feathers, what are the regulations and what are they specifically for ducks?
Ooh. So raptor feathers, unless you are Native American, you cannot collect any eagle or hawk feathers. I don't think that applies to anything outside raptors, however. So I know of no regulations that would affect the collecting of duck feathers.
I have a question.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so if you found a hawk feather or a bald eagle feather, it is against the law for you to keep that unless you are Native American.
I'm contributing the law. I have a regular city year.
Okay, so tell you what, I'm going to stop recording the sentence that began with I am going